to the next session, and I will call Mike. Is Mike around? Yes. Mark. Guido? Hi, Guido. Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you. Hi, nice to meet you. Please take a seat. Sarah, we'll also have Sarah. Please sit.
Yeah, I'll sit.
Yeah, sit.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, you're the moderator, right? Yes. Nice to meet you, Mark. Please take a seat. We have 30 minutes?
Yeah, okay.
You said 25 in a second.
25 better. Can we keep 5-10 minutes at the end for the question?
No, we have questions as we go through.
Okay, let's do that like this. I'm good. I will be doing this when we have 5 minutes left. Okay? Hello. So please take a seat. We have a chair. Yeah, I'm taking. Tell us.
Oh, they're around it.
Right.
If I'm moderating, I'll sit on the end.
Yeah, well,
Someone missed the flight.
no,
The moment I heard her voice, so feel free to start.
I got it.
You have it. We have it. You want one?
We all have it.
Okay, I keep it.
I'm the joker. Okay.
Thank you so much. So we
Hello,
will start.
everybody.
Yes.
Now, I'm a little bit hard of hearing, and when I was standing at the back earlier, I was having a little bit of trouble hearing. You can hear okay at the back? All right, excellent. So, welcome to this afternoon session, which is about media relationships, how to build them, how to engage with the media in order to achieve your organization's objectives. I'll introduce myself, and I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm Mark Cooper. I work for an organization called JTA, which is a communications agency based in London, specialized in the Olympic movement. I was formerly head of communications for the Olympic Games at the IOC a very long time ago, but I think that's why they dragged me up here. So I'll pass over to Mike.
Hello, I'm Mike Laughlin. I've been in sport for about 30 years. Originally started working for the World Athletics Federation, building media information systems for 5 different international sports federations, and then moved across to the business media world rather than the sports media world, talking about the information of sport on the business side. And I ran a company called SportCal for 27 years. And just recently, I'm setting up a global sustainability and sport organization because I really like the work that Gert and Ingrid are doing. I think sustainability is a big area at the moment, so that's my new speciality. So.
Good afternoon, room. I already gave a short introduction to myself earlier. For those of you that I'm not connected with on LinkedIn, please do so. It'd be a pleasure to connect with you. I'm an Olympian, very proudly, and I then, from a communication standpoint, set up my own company immediately after retiring as an athlete called Consultant Ski. So not consultancy, Consultant Ski. I was in my early 20s at that stage. I then moved into the administrative side of the sport and worked for the National Ski Association in Great Britain before moving to Switzerland in 1994 to take on the role of the coordinator for the level below the World Cup series, the qualification series at the International Ski Federation, FIS, where I then progressed to become the director and the CEO, the Secretary General, which I did for 22 years. I fairly recently concluded that role and have been working with the Chinese Winter Sports Association in their preparations for the Beijing 2022 Games, and then just recently set up my own consultancy. And it's really a pleasure to support this event, the MEI Hosts and Federation Summit, because as Annette from Stavanger said earlier, I think that the concept for you, for us, from the federations world, to really have this great engagement with cities and with different partners who want to meet you specifically is very interesting. And I think there's going to be a great program over the next days, and it's not just same as, same as. So it fits nicely into the mix of all the other events as well, which are taking place, but it's great to be back in person. So there we are. I've saved myself some time from our panel, which is coming up at 4 o'clock. So just a little bit of promotion for that one too.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks to MEI for hosting this. I think there's been said a lot about the concept and bringing all these people together. I think it's really good. We have been a proud member of the organization. My name is Guido Bouw. I work for Grace Note Sports, formerly known as Infostrada Sports. That might ring a bell with some of you. My credentials are possibly my master's in business communications and politics, which makes me very good, capable of working in sports, I would say. Especially that last piece, because we do see that there's a lot of, moving parts to all of our businesses and getting things done. Specifically for Grace Note Sports, as you might know, we have the world's largest sports results and sports information database. We drive all kinds of products and services to international federations, to event organizers, but also to media publishers to support them in their coverage and boosting their profile and perception of the sports, of the events that take place, of the athletes that are participating. So when we talked earlier today about Nielsen Sports, where sponsoring comes in with host city impact or event impact analysis, the perception or the profile that is built up before the event, during the event, but hopefully stays after the event, is one of those huge impacts that that any of these stakeholders involved in an event are looking for. So we're very happy to be supporting that at many multi-sports events, World Championships, World Cup cycles, and hopefully I can contribute a little bit to this conversation because of all of that. Thank you.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it from all of you. And so I thought it might be useful for us to just consider a little bit what we mean when we talk about media, because the concept of media has changed, and as you've probably already been able to gather, we've been in the game for a little while, and the concept of media has certainly changed over that period. It used to be that media was this, that pretty much two blocks. You had your print media and you had your broadcast media. But those have merged, especially around online and digital. It's become possible for rights holders, it's become possible for cities to become their own media, in addition to which we have social media. So I think it would be useful for us to concentrate probably mostly on print type media and broadcast for now. And I'd also like us to consider a couple of different phases of the relationships between rights holders and media. I'd like us to consider the period that is outside of competitions and then the period that's inside competitions. And I'd also like to try and engage you guys as much as possible. So that means that the people with the microphones are not going to be working just for the last 5 minutes of the session. I'm probably going to be asking you some questions during the session, and also feel free to ask a question anytime you want without waiting to the end. And so firstly, quick fire round. Let's come up with some different ways traditionally in which a rights holder might engage with a journalist or a broadcaster. Yep.
Well, certainly from my experiences, and I think you're quite right, Mark, the world has changed a lot. And so it's about creating narrative and being able to feed that narrative and that data to the journalists. I think nowadays it's so much is going on. If you're creating information but not being able to feed it to the media, it's very difficult and very complicated. But in my experience, certainly working with the international federations for a long time, it's about trying to create the stories, whether it be around the actual what's happening in the competition, the athletes and the players themselves. And so that's data. If you take a lot of information that we are producing, the story is created from data. So it's all about how do you actually aggregate data. And this is one of the areas I'm seeing a lot of. I mean, certainly skiing, you put a lot of effort into building big information systems, but it's the analysis of that data. And I think that's certainly one of the things I didn't used to do very well, and I think it's something that certainly the international federations could do better, is analyzing your own data to create your own stories, which you can then feed to the press and the media.
Well, if I could actually jump over to Guido, sorry. How do you find that rights holders are best then making data available to the media when they're on site at a competition, and even when they're covering the competition virtually, as is increasingly the case?
Yeah, well, I think overall they're not doing a really good job. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here, of course, to propagate that type of service. But I think it's honest. I think lots of sports properties and rights owners don't have their data in order to drive those stories. Because it is what Mike said. It's not the data itself, not the result per se, that says anything, but it's always in context. It's always in relevance. It's always leading up to a certain event, trying to anticipate what might happen, what ticks. And I think that with the plethora of platforms that there are today, people are less inclined to read like full stories, 16,000 pages on an athlete, but just want to have those trivial, almost factual insights that teaches them a little bit more about that athlete, about the rules of that game, about the background of that sports federation, about the background of a world record, and will it be broken again, next time around. And I think that's where at least, sports results and athlete curated information into a database that can then pull that out is very important. And I think the big change was when you said, print, they just like long articles. Well, that has changed. We all see that because they have to move to online where you don't have the span of attention for those long articles. Same as in broadcasts. How many times haven't we heard and enjoyed a sports broadcast better when there is interesting information? Whether it's about those castles that the Tour de France passed by, or whether it's about the background of the specific athlete, what he or she has done in their younger years, or whether it's about, yes, in this match, a new record could be broken. Those are the insights that TV commentators also would like to give. And that is the engaging pieces, small pieces that are spread out left and right, which we're getting much more used to.
Thank you. Sarah, are there any good examples you can give us from FIS about how you used to then gather data? Did you have a central repository of data from competitions about athletes? And then how did you drive value from that?
Great question. I'd just like to ask the audience a question, since you asked if we could engage with them. And how many of you actually remember communications before the internet? How many of you remember that actually communications back in those days, when I started my public relations consultancy, was about having lunch with a journalist, getting that appointment to have lunch with a journalist? They existed. They existed. They were not so good for our waistline. They were definitely not so efficient about getting stories exposed, but that was the reality back then, and that was the way you could get exposure. But to come back to you, yes, I have to say that we were one of the early adopters back then at the International Ski Federation, and we were transmitting results electronically from the 1990s, and formerly Infostrada, as I remember them then. Maybe some of you in the room also remember them as Infostrada. Can remember that, when actually we would send results electronically. Goodness knows how, but I was using actually my mobile phone to connect from Chile. I remember that in 1994. That's how it was in those days, and putting your connection in the walls and getting through this modem dial-up and all sorts, But it meant that we had a database of results from all around the world. Well, for about 4 years, it was just a database. And then the internet became a reality, that suddenly we realized that that data was going to form the engine for being able to provide the calendar, profiles of the athletes, and then we could make analysis of what they were doing. So who has the most victories? Who has the most victories at that particular competition? Now, we have to imagine the International Ski Federation alone running more than 7,000 events a year in the calendar. So that's a lot of events and a lot of data to be able to analyze some very interesting information. And then, even with just the basic information of the athletes, when you've got their name, their nation, their age, you can already develop a great profile from that event and, of course, from that athlete. And Infostrada, as it was back then, and I think throughout a big proportion of their career, they used to deliver for us a fantastic service at World Cup competitions in all disciplines, actually, which was Fact of the Day. And this was terrific little nuggets for the media, which were exactly what you're saying, Mark. Namely, it was additional facts about the athletes. I mean, for example, how many of you know that last year's winner of the Tour de France from Slovenia, someone can help me on that one, was formerly a member of the Slovenian ski jumping team? You know, this is a very interesting fact to know, and he was celebrated by his Slovenian ski jumping friends, and it created great momentum for Slovenian winter sports and Slovenian ski jumping. And being such a famous guy, and the fact that he came to visit them and was presented the award when one of their very famous jumpers retired at the end of the season. So these are kind of the, let's say, complementary communication. What you can't expect is for the media to work stuff out for themselves. So when you say, well, you know, surely you can see that there are 5 athletes from Austria in the top 10. No, you've got to give them those facts. Summarize it all for them, the interesting facts of the day afterwards, so that you're using your data to the best possible effect. And there are plenty of people who can do that for you. For example,
and Guido, how are you making the data, this data available now to media? Because if we look, for example, back to the Athens Olympic Games, a journalist would go up in the main press center to a physical terminal, a kiosk. They would be able to look up this data, and they would then be able to print it off. They'd have to take it back to their laptop and then retype it into their laptop. I imagine things have moved on a lot.
Yeah, things have moved on, but I'd like to go back to the title of this of this panel. I think, you know, if you look at media relationships, they have changed, as Sarah already said, over the last couple of years significantly, from sit-down talks, even with athletes, to get their information, to getting everything online. Right? Wikipedia is a great source, but it's just one source. That doesn't have to be right. So you have to have multiple sources to get all that information correct. If you want to please media, you know, at an event or you know, you have to give them access. And access is to the athlete, access is to the venue, access is to internet these days, because without internet you feel totally lost. And what we say, and we add, access to information. 90% of what we see and hear and read about an event or an athlete is through the media. So they are your channel to bring your story of the event, the sports, and the athletes, and and everything about it to them. If you give them what they need, those 4 points, they will not go looking for something else. They will not go looking for bad transportation or broken sinks in the athletes' villages. They get what they need: coverage, support. And you also want the NBC commentator to state the same record as the BT Sport commentator. You want to have the same background of the Greco-Roman debutant from Kazakhstan playing an athlete against Portugal that everyone has, right? So it's in your self-interest, if you speak to an international federation or a host of an event, but even the host cities involved, to make sure that the media are happy. Maybe 1/5 is food and beverage. Give them good food and give them good beverage. That also works. Just to make sure that they are supported in the job that they're actually doing. All right. Now, coming back to your question, how does it work today? It still largely works like that today. At the Olympic Games, journalists who have been there, they know they have an accreditation. That accreditation gives them a password to a media info system, which is everything from weather to transport information to schedule to athlete background to records results and those facts and figures in a stream as they become relevant. So it's for them to pick that up from there. But why doesn't that also go to the fan? Why doesn't it also go to the audience who visits the Olympic.org website, or the federation if it's a Winter Olympic, of skiing, or the sponsor or the advertiser, activating around that event, because it's sponsorable content, all this information really. So it's still media info system, but nowadays, of course, since everything is connected, there's data feeds going in which automatically display the information on the website. There are widgets, there's mobile, social, infographics. It just goes anywhere, really. Again, we're just doing the content. Our client does the distribution and the platform organization.
Thank you. When I hear you talking about the importance of accuracy, and when I hear you talking about access, what I'm hearing with regard to accuracy is trust, because a journalist needs to know that they can trust what you're providing. Mm-hmm. And with that access, you're also providing value. And I think we can all agree that trust and value are cornerstones of any good relationship. Now, Mike, I understand that you've been looking at the way that some of international federations have been trying to engage in relationships of value and trust with media, and particularly through their uses of their own websites.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, Mark. So one of the things I wanted to know was kind of how federations are communicating their information these days, because as Sarah says, it's changed from lunches to, you've got to provide information to them. And what I typically see in a lot of the federation world is that the data is largely there in terms of calendars, results, and things like that. But actually, even today, some of those results are actually PDFs, so they're not even searchable. And I think that we're in an age now where you've got to have got past that already. Integrated data, linked data is absolutely critical. I too often go to see a media profile and there's no link to the results, so I can't actually see what the performance of the athlete was, or I can't see what the head-to-head was. I mean, I was working in 2004 for the Badminton World Federation, and we were linking head-to-heads back then, 2004, it's nearly 20 years ago. So you should be having that kind of information and that availability of data. And that's where the trust begins to build with the media, because if the media know that you've got great information and great sources, they're going to come to you for stories. They're going to come to you for clips. I can remember an Ivan Nizovic example in Wimbledon where he had played 4 5-set matches back to back. And I'd been working at the ITF for probably about 4 or 5 years, and I got this call from the men's department saying, Mike, we got a journalist asking, when did that happen last? And we actually managed to go back to 1963, which was the only time that had ever happened at Wimbledon. Because we had the data, we were able to produce the story. It was in the paper all the next day. It was a great piece of information. So it's understanding technology. Guido knows that very well at the Olympic Games. One of the frustrations for me with the Olympic Games has always been you've got the media information set which doesn't link to the results set. That's been going on for years. So they're now trying to change that and trying to make it much more integrated. And data integration is absolutely key in this day and age. If you're going to build your relationship with the media, it's about getting your data right, making sure it's really top-notch, and you can analyze it, and then you're going to capture the media's hearts.
I'd like to follow up on another point, because we've been very focused on your data and maximising its use, which is a point that Guido touched on before, and that's taking care of the media. So for those who are going to the time and expense of actually coming to your event, it's a small investment to take care of them properly. And that's basically about ensuring that they've got a great internet connection. Media services is just fundamental. It really is. That their accreditation takes them where they want to, when they need to be there, that they respect the rules of the game, they understand what the parameters are, but feed and water them properly. That is, it's a small investment, but I can tell you that is absolutely massive. It really counts for a lot. When it comes to haggling over if they have to pay for coffee or if they actually get some refreshments with their coffee, don't go there. Don't make them have to kind of beg for these things. So it's a small gesture, it really is, but even for small events, it's very much worth making, isn't it, Guido?
Yeah, I think it is. And you know, we talked a lot about the data, and of course that's music to my ears. But I think with also the changing circumstances as of late, with, you know, COVID, events being postponed, people being unable to travel, events that would like to, you know, ease up on the mixed zones, you know, you're too close together, right? All those things we've seen, it seems like it's all gone, but it's not. It could just flare up at any moment. So besides taking care of them at the venue and at, you know, the location there, you know, setting up your own in-house press agency, as we call it, where you have your own reporters, just neutralizing flash quotes out of the mixed zones, making them centrally available, going to the press conferences, writing up the highlights, showing the video, making them remote available. That will make a lot of journalists still be able to cover the event, which that's exactly what you want, but they don't necessarily have to be everywhere. I have not seen a journalist who can be in a multi-sports event at the same time at alpine skiing as with speed skating. He or she simply can't. So you have to do also, if you want to perfect them, make them not only physically available at that certain location, but also make use of the technology that we have today in collecting information, making it available remote, so people can even stay at home or in their offices without even having to travel.
And I think that's a vital part of respecting the way that their work has changed, because it used to be that a journalist going to one of these sports events was expected to write a 600 to 800 word report about a competition. But that's no longer the case. Now they're expected to write at least 2 or 3 of those in the day. They're expected to run it all on social media and provide running commentary as they're doing it. And then they're probably expected to also go on to some broadcast show at some point and act as a pundit on one of those shows. So I think it's vital to respect the way that their work has evolved. I am conscious, however, that we've been talking for a while now. We haven't left that much space for you guys. Do we have any questions or comments from you guys? Yes, please. Hello, would you just wait for a microphone for a moment? Okay. Thank you.
Again, hello, my name is Florian, and you guys now have talked a lot about the classical media, like more or less in the old days. I'm very much interested in what your answer is to kind of touching the new target groups, like Gen Z. I mean, this, for me, is the biggest lag for most of the federations that they're facing, that they're so old-fashioned, because there's still all the old people like me sitting there and trying to understand the younger generation and how they consume media. And if you look at stadiums or at most of the sports, the visitors are becoming older and older, and we're all leaning back and nothing is really happening. And we're all proud that we're using Facebook nowadays, while this generation is, again, more us using it, while the younger generation is not using it at all. So,
listen, yeah. I have a TikTok account. I hope none of you ever find it, but... So, yeah, no, you make an extremely good point. And I think for older people, they will get a lot of their information from traditional media. But then as you move younger, we're seeing more and more people second screening and expecting to get things from social. And I would say that for the youngest people, they're actually looking predominantly at social. So perhaps next time we have one of these, where's Dennis? There he is. Next time we have one of these, let's make sure that we have one on social, so that we can incorporate that and think about the balance between traditional media and social media. Now, I'm conscious that because of the time, we might not be able to give as much feedback on your questions as we might like, but please bear in mind that we're also available to speak during the networking sessions.
And Mark, just to add in perhaps to a comment there, personally, what I've seen is working really, really well is the engagement within sport, within companies of that generation. So someone who's 19 is already touching on being past it. And there are plenty of interns out there who are really, really excited to get involved. Young reporters, and giving them work experience as well as part of also their education. So there are not only about hiring people, it's also about using smart solutions. So even the smaller events, smaller federations can finance this, and that's really, I think, a very important way. How do they want to be communicated with? So it's not necessarily teaching old dogs new tricks, and that we've all changed our habits completely now in terms of how we consume sport, basically on these and through social media. But it's also about getting them on board and getting them to engage and to just do it. They do it without any issues at all.
Well, I think a lot of organisations are getting it. I'll give you one example. I was speaking to the communications director at FISU recently. He said, well, why, and he's a recent hire, he's like, why are we writing 400 to 600 word stories for our website? What is the point? Who is going to read those? I'm just going to redeploy all of my resources to making little social snippets. And it's a far better use of his resources. The gentleman over there had a question.
Yeah.
And okay.
Okay. Sorry, my question was, I'm sorry, is it Ingrid? Sarah. Oops.
That's Ingrid over there.
My bad. Sorry.
Sustainability.
Sorry.
She'll fix everything.
My question was kind of in regard to sustainability, the previous topic. Given climate change and global warming and all of that, we saw at Beijing a total lack of snow in the last Olympics. How sustainable are the Winter Olympics?
This is sounding a little bit unrelated to this panel.
Okay, my bad.
Do you think I might be able to suggest that you guys have that discussion during the break?
Okay,
Would that
no
be
worries.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, super. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.